We interrupt this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
That is correct. And I happen to be Samuel Trapp. This happens to be International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. Tell you what, last night I got a little bit worked up, let's say, about the story that I wish to tell you, and I'm going to tell it to you tonight, and I'm going to tell you the full story tonight. So let's get started with this. If you feel like calling in tonight, please do. Have a lot of fun. 573-746-8020, and I'd be happy to chat with you. But there's also a story to be told, and I only got an hour and a half to tell this story, and it might be longer than that because it's quite a few pages. So what I did was, and I talked a little bit about it last night. So Chernobyl occurred April 26, 1986, okay? And it was, you know, quite the big deal. I remember I was serving in the military at that time, and there were I was learning Russian at that time. I was at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, studying Russian when that occurred. And it was a big deal for us. They stopped everything at the school. The military, I think military everywhere in the U.S. was, I don't want to say locked down or anything like that, certainly on an alert status of some sort, right? And so we were reviewing what was occurring in the world, and that was a big event at that time. And so also at that time, the 90s were the age of X-Files, right? And all kinds of interesting things going on in the world. That was, Fox Mulder. I was always a Scully fan and a Mulder fan, and always watched the X-Files and, wondered. And I always would say things like, it wouldn't surprise me if, back then you were a nut job if you believed in the X-Files or believed that there was extraterrestrial life or other life on other planets, or, Star Trek was for real or anything like that. And but nowadays, far more people are inclined to believe that there's something else out there, right? Well, same with Russia. Mother Russia says the same. There's also theorists over there and conspiracy theories. About 2 years ago, I watched a miniseries called Chernobyl, and it was interesting. It was a bunch of kids who lived in the town nearby. I believe they lived not far away. And there's the town of Chernobyl. So they built Chernobyl on a swamp, way far away from everything else. And nobody thought too much about it, but everybody else is building their power plants near to where things are. But so there's a lot of questions about how that got picked. Site was picked in the 70s, and it was built way back then, and there was some issues with technology on the Russian side back then and all kinds of stuff that went along. Well, Russia built nearby a little town, and that town is called Pripyat. And this story on TV was about these younger kids, college age, going back to Chernobyl to explore strange sort of X-File type stuff. And it was a 10 series or something, 10, I don't know, 8 or 10, like miniseries, like you would watch Severance on Apple TV or something. It was similar to that. And so they had their stories as well. And so this story came out. It was last week when I was trying to select a topic for my Sunday night program that goes 2 hours, and I picked two. But this video showed up, and it was a long video, and I watched it all. Now, I'm not saying to you that I believe this. This is not War of the Worlds, George Orwell. anything like that they tried to fool you into believing the Martians are coming and taking over the world. And I'm not sure what I believe. So don't go saying, oh, gee, Sam said this is, some conspiracy theory. I'm only going to share this with you because I personally find it interesting. And so that I can make sure to get through this tonight, because there's a lot of material, we're going to tell a story today. So sit back, get yourself some cookies and some warm milk, or perhaps, well, I like warm milk, but, hey, some people like it cold and they want to dip their cookies in it. Oh, what a waste of a perfectly good cookie. Don't do that, number one. And number two, drink your warm milk, or get your slippers on and your jammy pants and get all curled up in a little ball. And we're going to tell you the story of Chernobyl, X-Files version. Ready? And so we begin. The morning of April 26, 1986 in Moscow began as usual. The usual meetings were held in the Kremlin. Documents Day for May Day demonstrations were being prepared on the old square. And the plan of the seed campaign was discussed in the building of the Council of Ministers. No one knew that at that very minute, 200 kilometers from the capital, the Ukrainian SSR was already burning out the number 4 power unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the name of Lenin. It was called the Leninskaya Zavod nuclear. So, the first message arrived at 7:43 a.m. The duty officer of the general headquarters wrote in the magazine the following lines. Incident at CHNPP. That is Chernobylskaya nuclear power plant. Fire. Measures being taken. Everything is okay. Incident. Not disaster, not explosion, not tragedy, just incident. Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev learned about what happened at 11 a.m., 3.5 hours later. Witnesses recall that the general secretary went pale after reading a short note, but immediately got himself together and said a phrase that determined the entire further strategy. No panic. We will figure it out. The main thing is not to give the West a reason to speculate about this, and the silence machine was working at full capacity. In fact, from April 27, there was not a word about Chernobyl. The news was silent. Pravda published a press release on the achievement of Soviet energy. On April 28, when a Swedish nuclear engineer raised the alarm due to the increased radiation background in the area, a short message appeared on Soviet newspaper TASS. 14 lines on the last line. An incident occurred at Chernobyl nuclear power plant. One of the reactors was damaged. Measures are being taken to eliminate the consequences. Victims are being helped. Government commission has been created. 14 whole lines about the largest technological disaster of the 20th century. But behind the scenes, something completely different was happening. In the secret protocols of the meeting of the Politburo from April 26, which were declassified in 2019, there was a strange note. Member of Politburo Igor Legasov asks, well, what about the CH2 object? And Gorbachev replies, the CH2 object is under control. Che-2 is what that's called. Che-2 is the localization was successful, but what is the CH2 object? There's no such designation in any official document of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. 4 power units are numbered in order. The 5th and 6th were being built, but there is no Chernobyl 2, CH2, in the design documentation. The first heroes, the liquidators that arrived on scene 3 hours after the explosion, firefighters led by Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik, extinguishing the burning roof of the engine room, not knowing that the very minute that every minute on the roof was taking years off of their lives. Official reports say that they arrived at 2 hours, 10 minutes in the middle of the night and immediately began extinguishing the fire. But here's what's strange about that. In the personal diary of Pravik's wife, Nadezhda, there's a record from April 25, Volodya returning from a shift of some kind of strange activity. This is the 25th, before the fire. He said that they were raised by alarms in the evening and sent to a training station, but the training was canceled, and they spent the whole evening in the unit. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, the alarm came again. Now it's real. Why raise firefighters by alarm a few hours before the incident? What kind of exercises were planned at night in the nuclear power plant? Witnesses collected in the first few days after the disaster, which released all the documents in 2019, draw a picture different from the official version. A fisherman named Pyotr Kyomich, who caught fish at night in the cooling pond, was, of course, that's illegal, but he was watching it, and he said he was there. So at 11 p.m. on the 25th, he saw something strange at the fourth block, as if a northern glow began to show. It was beautiful and shimmering. It flashed for about 15 minutes like northern lights and then disappeared. He thought maybe new spotlights were being tested. The nurse at Pripyat Hospital, the town that they built to house all the people who were servicing, is Pripyat. And at Pripyat Hospital, Galina Arkhipova wrote in her diary, on April 25th, 3 workers from the station were brought to us with strange burns. Not steam nor chemical. Their skin seemed to be burning from the inside out. The head physician ordered her not to tell anyone, to put the cards with the date of April 27th. She asked why. He just shook his head. It's none of your business, Galia. The workers died on April 26 at 4 a.m., 2 hours before they were officially brought to the hospital from the scene of the accident. But the most amazing thing was found in the archives of the Ministry of the Energy of USSR. There they found a report by the head of the shift of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Alexander Akimov, dated April 23. 3 days before the disaster, Akimov wrote, I bring to your attention that in the last 24 hours, abnormal readings of neutron sensors are observed in the 4th power unit. Activity bursts occur periodically at 3 hours and 17 minutes. The nature of the phenomenon is unclear. I would like you to send a group of specialists from the Kurchatov Institute. The answer came quickly, too quickly for Soviet bureaucracy. On April 24, a man named Vorobyov arrived in Pripyat. He introduced himself as a consultant from Moscow. He didn't give his patronymic, that's the middle name, just and formally you would. He's just Comrade Vorobyov. In the journal of the visit to the nuclear power plant, he signed indiscriminately, so you couldn't read it, and in the schedule of the organization there was a strange stamp, MSOS 12. No such ministry or department of the USSR has a unit with such a designation. Vorobyov spent the whole day at the station on April 25th. The eyewitnesses remember him, medium height, inconspicuous, ordinary gray suit, but everyone remembered his eyes, attentive, as if he was looking for something or waiting for something. At 11:30 at night on the 25th, Vorobyov left the station an hour and a half before the explosion. His Volga, Russian car, with Moscow plates was spotted at the checkpoint in Chernobyl at midnight. He left for Kiev calmly, without a hurry, as if his work was done. And at this time, on the 4th power unit, the very malicious experiment on the escape of the turbo generator began. This is the test that they were supposed to run. Officially, a test of the possibility of using mechanical energy of the rotor to provide power supply in case of depletion. An experiment that was conducted 3 times, and each time it ended in failure. An experiment that, for some reason, had to be carried out on the night of the 25th and to the 26th. In the test protocol, miraculously surviving in the safe of the administrative building, there's a note made by the deputy chief engineer, Anatoly Dyatlov. Start the experiment at 1 o'clock at the signal from Moscow. At what signal? From whom? Why Moscow? To control a routine test on a peripheral nuclear power plant. And this is where the most interesting news begins. In the personal belongings of the deceased operator Leonid Toptunov, a notebook with strange records was found. The last record was completed at 0 hours 50 minutes. On April 26, the reactor's behaving strangely. The readings do not converge. It's as if there's another neutron source inside of it. I told Akimov. He blinked and whispered. They launched CH2. And he said, God, why? I don't understand what he's talking about. What is CH2? After 33 minutes, Leonid Toptunov presses the AZ5 button, the emergency protection of the reactor. But instead of stopping the reaction, it caused an explosion. But was it an explosion of the reactor or something else? What was hidden under the codename Object CH2? In the secret protocols of the Politburo, there's another strange phase. The Ministry of Defense Sokolov reports. The chemical defense troops are ready to work in the special zone. The perimeter is already set, according to the protocol Black Mark. The Black Mark protocol is still classified today, but it is known that it was developed in 1984, 2 years before the Chernobyl disaster, as if someone knew that the disaster would happen and was preparing in advance. The decision about the construction of a nuclear power plant in this place still raises questions among experts. Why here in the Belarusian Ukraine among swamps and forests away from large industrial centers? The official version says proximity to water, convenient logistics, center of the European part of the USSR. But the documents tell a different story. In 1967, when research work a strange expedition arrived in these places, formerly Geological Party Number 47 from the Ministry of Geology. But the head of the party was a Colonel, Mikhail Chernenko, a specialist in ancient languages. Yes, this is what was written in his personnel files. A specialist in deciphering ancient text and symbols. What was the military cryptographer looking for in Polisi swamps? The old-timers of the village of Kopachi, the one that will be completely buried underground after the incident, told amazing stories. Even during Tsarist reign, strange stones and strange signs were found here, heavy black stones, and these stones were warm even in winter. The locals called them the Devil's Oven and bypassed them. In 1923, the expedition of the Academian Vernadsky came here. Vernadsky lived in the vicinity of the future Pripyat for 3 weeks and left very excited. There's a mysterious record in his diaries. He called it the place of power, where there is a thin line between worlds. When humanity dominates the atom, it should be careful right here. The Chernenko expedition worked all summer of 1967. They drilled wells, but not ordinary geological wells, but according to a strange pattern. 5 wells in a circle and 1 in the center. The depth of each is exactly 113 meters. Why exactly so many? It is not indicated in the report. At a depth of 113 meters, all 6 wells entered the cavity, a huge underground cavity of natural origin, or maybe not natural. The Chernenko report has other notes. The walls of the cavity have traces of radioactive processing and age is undetermined. The radiation background was 17 times the norm, and this is before they even built. Radiation background underground 20 years before Chernobyl? The decision on the construction of the nuclear power plant was done exactly at this place 2 weeks after the Chernenko report. Moreover, it was done at the very top. The resolution was signed by Brezhnev himself. And there's an interesting point in parallel. With the construction of the power unit, it was decided to conduct work on the object of special purpose, according to the application number 7. No one has ever seen the application number 7. It was stored in a special folder, and only 3 people had access to it: the General Secretary, the Minister of Defense, and the Chairman of the KGB. So construction began in 1970. Thousands of workers, hundreds of units of equipment. But here's what's interesting. There were two different categories of builders. Some lived in a temporary village and built what would later become the city of Pripyat, and in fact the nuclear power plant. Others lived in a closed town 10 kilometers from the construction site behind barbed wire and under security. They came into the facility only at night. They worked in a separate area fenced by a high fence. The foreman, Vasily Kornichuk, who had been working on the construction from the very first day, said, "We called them the night shift. I don't know what they were building there, but the concrete they poured was 3 times more than I have ever seen in such reinforcements. The rods," meaning the, rebar, "was as thick as a hand and of some special alloy. One time I accidentally looked behind their fence. There was a cauldron, huge, 100 meters in diameter and an unknown depth, and tunnels came from this cauldron. I don't know where. The tunnels, I don't know where they went. After the accident, when they began to dig a cauldron under the foundation of the sarcophagus, the builders came across concrete structures that were not supposed to be in the project. The head of the sarcophagus construction, General Tarakhanov, ordered to bypass them and write in the report old communications that are not of interest. But one of the engineers, Sergei Voloshin, went down in the tunnel. What he saw there made him evacuate and never return. It was not just a tunnel, he said years later. He said it was a corridor with a width of 5 meters and a height of 3 meters, and the walls are cast concrete with metal fittings, but the doors were massive metal doors with locks that he had never seen before. Not mechanical, not electronic, something else. There are signs on the doors. No radiation hazard, no high voltage. Symbols that are not in any reference book. And it was cold from behind these doors. In July, when the heat is in the 90s and the metal doors are underground, the cold was such that his breath turned into steam. Officially, there are no special structures, but the maps say otherwise. On the topographic map of the General Staff until 1970, an anomaly is marked in this area. Territory with unstable geomagnetic characteristics. After 1970, all the maps were reprinted and the anomaly disappeared. But the 5th Energy Unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant began to be built in 81, and by the time of the accident, it was ready. It was running the 5th one, was at 80%. But after the disaster, construction stopped officially. But here's what's strange. In 1987, the 5th unit, another special materials unit, came to the site. Leaf lead, graphite blocks, and again, strange fittings. What were these materials going to build? The reports say they were used to eliminate the consequences of the accident, but not a single, they call them liquidators, but radiation expert remembers graphite blocks being used during the construction of the sarcophagus. Lead, yes, but not graphite. And here's another mystery. Energy supply. According to the project, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was supposed to supply 4,000 megawatts. But the analysis of the Minergo, which is a Ministry of Energy, documents show that only 3,200 were supplied. Where did the other 800 megawatts go? The official answer is the station's own needs. But any energy expert will say that is too much for one plant. The nuclear power plant of this type consumes a maximum of 100 to 150 megawatts. So 650 megawatts went somewhere else. Where? Underground? To the same tunnels and underground facilities that officially do not exist? There's a curious document in the archive of the KGB in Ukraine. A report from April 15, 1986, 11 days before the disaster, a Major Stetsenka reports, according to agency data, foreign intelligence was activated last week. 3 attempts to enter our closed zone around Chernobyl. The detainees claimed they were tourists lost in the forest, but they found devices of unknown purpose, devices which were transferred to the KGB for examination. The results of the examination are still classified, but there's a leak of information from a former employee. These were not really devices, but detectors, and they did not detect radiation, but something else. Some sort of radiation that we did not understand at the time. The devices were off the scale, and when they were directed to the 4th power unit. 11 days after the explosion, the unknown devices of the unknown tourists were off scale when directed to the 4th unit, which then worked normally. In the foundation of the 4th power unit, according to builders, a capsule was laid, a steel cylinder 2 meters long and 0.5 meter in diameter. What was in it? Nobody knows. The capsule was brought from Moscow in a plumbed car under heavy guard. They laid it at the geometric center of the foundation. After the explosion, the capsule should have been destroyed or thrown away. But when the rubble was cleared, it wasn't found. It just disappeared, like so many other things in Chernobyl. The old builder Kornichuk told his grandson before his death, "We did not build a nuclear power plant. We built a gate." But they did not know what the gate would open. In the office of the director of Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Viktor Bryukhanov, hung a schedule, an ordinary production schedule for April 1986. But the schedule of April 25 and 26, there was a strange mark with red pencil. Pauline. It's a revelation of John the Theologian. This is the name of the star that will fall to the ground and poison the waters, according to the Bible. The 3rd angel rose, and a large star fell from the sky, burning like a lamp, and it fell on the 3rd part of the rivers and on the source of the water. The name of the star is Pauline. Coincidence? Or someone with a perverted sense of humor chose this code name for the experiment at the nuclear power plant? Or maybe the name was not chosen by accident. Documents show that the preparation for the experiment began not for days, but in 3 months. In January 1986, a group of specialists from the closed N2-237 is an institute which is not listed in any reference books. Formally, it was subordinated to the Ministry of Medium Machinery, but in fact, they were strange. These Moscow ones recalled the operator of the 3rd block, Igor Krishenbaum. They always went in groups, didn't talk to anyone else. They lived not in Pripyat, but somewhere on a special facility. They came to the station with the military and worked only on Block 4, the one that blew up. And also, they had access where even we, the operators, were not allowed to go. Where? In the technical basement of the 4th block, there's a room number 217. And according to documents, it's a warehouse of spare parts. But the warehouse to which the armored door with the code lock leads is a warehouse in which 2 guards from a special department that Moscow specialists spent several hours a day in room 217. What they did there is unknown. But after their visits, electricity consumption increased sharply. And one more detail. After each visit, the medical center at the station, employees with complaints of headaches and nausea had to go to the hospital. They all worked on the 4th block in the rooms above 217. On April 15, a closed meeting took place. The protocol of the meeting has not been preserved, but there are memories of the participants. Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov insisted on postponing the experiment. He said the reactor was behaving unstably and that an additional system check was needed, but a representative from Moscow, the very mysterious Comrade Vorobyov, cut him off. The experiment will take place on schedule. This decision was done at the highest level. At what level? Who decided to conduct the potentially dangerous experiment on April 25th? There's a curious document in the archives of the Academy of Sciences. This these are calculations of the orbit of celestial bodies for April 1986. According to calculations, it was on 25 and 26 April that the Earth passed through a point of maximum convergence with a certain object designated as anomaly K17. What is K17? There's no information in open source, but in a closed report of the Institute of Space Research, it said about a gravitational anomaly in the orbit of Earth, the nature of which is not established. Passing through the anomaly zone can cause unpredictable effects on the operation of nuclear installations. Did the organizers of this experiment know this? Judging by the date, they did, and not just knew, but specifically chose this night. In the evening of April 25, preparation for the experiment began at the station, but something strange was happening. Witnesses say that in addition to the usual shift staff, people in the reactor hall were in military uniforms installing some kind of equipment. Not measuring devices, it was something else. It was antennas. Recall electrician Mikhail Davidov, metal structures in the form of spirals connected by thick cables to something in the basement. I asked what it was, and I was told to do your job. At 11 o'clock, the power of the reactor began to decrease. According to the experiment, it was necessary to reduce the power to 7,700 megawatts. But the reactor behaved strangely. The power dropped too quickly, as if something was sucking the energy out of the zone. The reactor seemed to resist. I've been working at the power plant for 5 years, but I'd never seen anything like this. The readings of the device jumped as if the processes were taking place inside the reactors, and we did not understand. At 28 minutes after midnight, the power dropped to 200. This is critically low. According to all the instructions, the experiment had to be stopped, but Dyatlov ordered us to continue. Why? What made an experienced engineer violate all safety rules? The answer might be in the testimony of security guard Vladimir Shevchenko, who was on duty at night in room 217. At about midnight, Moskovsky came out there, the one that Vorobyov imagined. His face was pale, his hands were shaking. He approached the phone, dialed some number, and said only 3 words. It started. We hold. Continue. He then returned to the room. What started? What did we hold? At 1 o'clock, the experiment on the escape of the turbo generator began, but something else was happening in parallel. The readings of the neutron flow counters were off the scale, although the power of the reactor was minimal. Where did neutrons come from? I looked at the devices and didn't believe my eyes, said senior reactor control engineer Boris Todorchuk. The neutron flow rose, but not from the active zone. It was coming from somewhere below, from beneath the reactor, as if there was a second power source. At 1 hour and 23 minutes 40 seconds, Alexander Akimov gave the order to press AZ5 emergency protection buttons. The absorber rods went down to silence the reaction, but instead of fading, something unimaginable began. It was not an explosion, but a flash, said fireman Vasily Ignatyenko, one of the first to arrive. A huge flash of light, but unusual. The light was wrong. It did not illuminate, but as if it penetrated through everything. I saw my bones through my skin. I saw my heart beating. And there was something else in this light, a huge, inhuman figure. It rose from the reactor up. What was it? Hallucination caused by radiation? But Ignatyenko was not the only one who saw it. At least 7 people, independently of each other, described a similar phenomenon. After the flash followed the explosion, something unusual occurred. Seismic stations recorded 2 pulses with an interval of 3 seconds. The first, magnitude 2.6. The epicenter was exactly under the 4th block at a depth of 100 meters. The second was 3.4. The epicenter in the reactor. 2 explosions, one underground, the second in the reactor. Or the first explosion was not an explosion, but something else. There's a strange record in the classified documents at the Ministry of Defense. At 1 hour, 24 minutes on the 26th, all ballistic missiles with a radius of 300 kilometers from Chernobyl received a signal for automatic launch, a signal that could come only from the Central Command Center in the case of a nuclear war. But nobody sent this signal. Fortunately, the protection systems worked and the launch didn't take place. But the fact does remain, something in Chernobyl that night generated a signal capable of launching nuclear missiles. After the explosion, what went down in history began. Fire, radiation, evacuation, liquidation, but there are details that were not included in official reports. For example, the fact that at the first hours of the explosion, a strange fog hung over the fourth block. Not smoke from the fire, but fog, dense with green tint. And in this fog, there were things that cannot be explained. Helicopter pilot Nikolai Melnik, who flew around the reactor on the morning of April 26, said that when we flew through the fog, the devices all went crazy. The altimeter would show that we had an altitude of 2,000 meters, although visually it was not more than 200. The compass was spinning like crazy. And then for a few seconds, everything disappeared. No fog. Everything disappeared. There was no station. There was no Pripyat. There was only a black funnel going somewhere deep into the ground, and something was rising from the funnel that I cannot describe. It was alive, but not alive. Material, but not material. Then it turned into place, went back in there. Hallucination? But a onboard tape recorder recorded how the second pilot shouted, "Kolya, do you see this? Where is the station? Where is everything?" Room 217 after the explosion was completely empty, not destroyed, not filled with debris, empty, as if everything there just disappeared. The walls remained, the floor and ceiling were intact, but inside there was absolute emptiness. And also, the temperature in the room was minus 40 degrees in April, with the total temperature at the station plus several hundred degrees from the fire. Moscow specialists from N2237 all disappeared. All 14 people. They were not among the dead. They were not among the injured. Not among the evacuated. They just ceased to exist. In the archives of the Institute, their personal affairs turned out to be empty folders, as if these people never existed. And Comrade Vorobyov, he was never seen in Moscow on April 27. He was seen in Moscow on April 27, alive, healthy, calm. He entered the building of the old square and never left again. The guards claimed they did not see how he left the building. He just disappeared. Only his report remained. Found years later in KGB archives. One page written in small handwriting and at the end underlined 3 times. The experiment was successful. The portal is closed. The threat is eliminated. I recommend that the object be conserved for 50 years. Portal? What portal? Threat? What threat? And most importantly, if the experiment was successful, then why did people die? Or was their death planned for something more? Almost 40 years have passed since that night. Many witnesses are no longer alive, but those who remain began to speak. Age, illness, understanding that there is little time left, all the untied tongues of those who kept silence for decades. The first to break his silence was Grigory Pravik, the younger brother of the hero of the fire, Vladimir Pravik. In 2021, in hospice, he called a journalist and dictated what had been bothering him for almost 40 years. Volodya called his brother on April 25 at 10 p.m. and said a strange thing. "Grisha, if something happens, no, I'm not doing it in vain." So he called on the 25th. "We do it all for a reason. This is more important than the life of one person or even thousands." He said, I asked what he meant, but he kept silent and said, "There are worse things than radiation, much worse." And he hung up. 3 hours before the fire, Vladimir Pravik knew that something would happen and knew that it would be deadly dangerous, but he was not talking about fire, but something else. In the personal belongings of Pravik, which his family returned after his death, they found a strange note. A few words scratched on a pencil on a piece of paper. I saw it. It's trying to get out. Hold the perimeter. Don't let it break through. What did you see? What was trying to get out? What perimeter? Galina Arhipova's nurse, the one who took the strange patients on April 25, she lived to 92 years old. Before her death, she passed her granddaughter a diary that she kept all those years. In the diary, there's a detailed description of what was happening in Pripyat Hospital in those days. On April 26 at 5 a.m., a man in a strange uniform was brought to us. He was not a soldier, not a worker. Gray suit, no identification marks. He was conscious, but did not speak. He could not or did not want to. I don't know. He had burns, but not like others. His skin did not burn. It seemed to dissolve. The pupils were vertical, like a cat's in his eyes. The head physician ordered me to isolate him and not let anyone in. An hour later, people came to the hospital and took him away. We didn't see him anymore. In the entry journal, this recording was crossed out. Who or what was this patient? Fisherman Pyotr Kromich, the one who saw the northern lights above the reactor, left behind something more than a memory. He had a Zenit camera, and that night he took several pictures. He showed the film a year later, fearing pursuit by the KGB. What was in the pictures made him hide those pictures for 35 years. In the photos taken at 23 hours 15 minutes on April, that's 11:15 p.m. The fourth power unit, you can really see the glow. But this is not northern lights. The glow has a clear structure, concentric circles. And the center of these circles is a dark spot, a spot when magnified that turns out to be a hole in the sky above the reactor. Modern analysis of the photo shows this is not a defect of the film and not optical illusion. Above the fourth unit, 2 hours before the disaster, there really was something that can only be described as a gap in space. But the most shocking evidence was left by nuclear physicist Valery Legasov, not in those notes that were published, but in a secret diary that he led in parallel with official notes. The diary was found in 2019 during the renovation of his apartment. It was walled up in a specially made niche. 147 pages of boring text. Each page overturns the idea of a Chernobyl disaster. April 27, I arrived in Chernobyl. What I saw does not fit in the framework of physics. The reactor did not just explode. He discovered something. Radiation comes not only from fuel, there is a source, the nature of which I do not understand. Spectral analysis shows isotopes that should not exist in our reality. On April 28th, I went down to room 217. It is empty, but not just empty. There is no space in the usual understanding. There's an entrance, but there is no room. How is this possible? On May 1st, I met with Vorobyov. Yes, he's alive and in Moscow. He told the truth. Chernobyl is not the first case. In 1957, the same thing happened at a lighthouse. In 1949, in Semipalatinsk. Every time when nuclear weapons are tested or reactors work, passages open in certain conditions to another space, another time, another reality. I do not know, but something is trying to come here. On May 15, I finally understood what happened. It was not an accident. It was protection. The reactor was blown up on purpose to close a portal that was already open. The energy of the explosion sealed the gap, but at what cost? On May 25, May 30th, Vorobyov disappeared. He simply dissolved in the air right in the office on Old Square. Before his disappearance, he managed to say, 40 years. You have 40 years. Then you will have to make a choice again. What will happen in 40 years? Legasov committed suicide in 1988, 2 years after the disaster. There was one phrase, I did everything I could. The rest is up to you. Engineer dosimetrist Maria Protasyenko worked in the zone from the very first days, and she died in 2022. But I recorded a video message. I've been measuring radiation for 40 years, and I can say certainly there are places in Chernobyl where radiation behaves incorrectly. It does not decrease over time as it should. It pulsates. as if something underground then falls asleep, then wakes up, and these pulsations are cleared. When I left the zone in 2020, it was 3 months. Now they say it's been a month. The driver of the armored personnel carrier, Semyon Katyushin, was driving scientists to the zone in 87. He told a story not included in any report. I was driving a group of physicists to the 4th block. Night, dark, only the headlights are shining, and suddenly I see a person ahead, right on the road. Calmly, I stop and shout to him, "Hey, don't you know where we are?" And he turned around, only it wasn't a person. He looked like a person, but his eyes were shining. They did not reflect light. They were shining green. And he had a smile too wide for a human face. He looked at us, smiled wider, and dissolved. He just disappeared. The physicist then kept silent all the way back, and only one whispered, "It can't be, it can't be." Helicopter pilot Nikolai Melnik, the one who saw the black funnel, left detailed notes about his flights over the reactor. The notes have a map with marks of anomalous zones, places where inexplicable phenomena occurred. There are 17 such places, and they are all located according to a spiral around the 4th block. On May 5th, 1986, flight number 23, when flying over the point 7,300 meters northeast of the reactor, a temporary shift occurred. For 14 seconds, we were in another time. There were no destroyed reactor below. There was a whole station, but not ours. Another, bigger, more modern, and above it hung a ship. A structure, I don't know how to describe it. Huge, metal, completely unearthly structure. The last evidence, the most mysterious, it belongs to a person whose name is classified. In the documents, he appears as Witness X. This is an employee of a special department of the KGB attached to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. I was in the command center at the station when it started. No, not an explosion, but before the explosion. At 1 hour, 19 minutes, all phones rang at the same time. But when they picked up the phones, they were all silent. Then all communication received the signals at the same time. Not a voice, not a code, a sound, a low vibration. From it, I put my ears... I have put my hands over my ears and my head began to hurt. It lasted 3 minutes and 17 seconds, and then the explosion. Witness X claims he saw a document in which the sound was decrypted. It was a message in an unknown language, but somehow decrypted later. There were only 3 words in the message, if they can be called that. The time has come. We opened... all these witnesses draw a picture far from the official version. Chernobyl was not just an accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It was a collision with something beyond our understanding. And apparently this collision is not over. In 12 testimonies, regardless of each other, the same date is mentioned, 2026, 40 years after the disaster. What should happen this year? And are we ready for it? 48 hours before the explosion at Chernobyl, the American spy satellite KN-11 took a series of pictures in the territory of Ukrainian SSR. It was a routine reconnaissance mission, nothing special, but when the pictures are shown in Langley, CIA analysts saw something that made them immediately raise an alarm. Above Chernobyl nuclear power plant, at a height of 3 kilometers, there was something that looked like a thermal anomaly in pictures. The temperature of the object was minus 120 degrees Celsius in April on a warm spring day. The object is cold, hanging in the air. Urgent meeting at the White House. President Reagan, and I have no idea, remember, if any of this is true. This is just an interesting story from the Russian side. President Reagan, after hearing the report, asked only one question. Do you know about this? The CIA director, William Casey, replied, judging by the activity at the station, yes, they are preparing for something there. And then a decision that still raises questions. A week before the disaster, an American delegation arrived in the USSR, officially a group of experts in nuclear energy. But the composition of the delegation was strange. There were nuclear physicists, but there were also specialists from theoretical physics from Livermore Labs, an expert on anomalous phenomenon from NASA. And what is most surprising? colonel of the U.S. Air Force, specializing in UFOs. The delegation visited several Soviet nuclear power plants, but special attention was paid to Chernobyl, where they stayed for 2 days on April 20 and 21. All this time, they were measuring with their devices. An interpreter of the delegation, Yelena Makarova, later recalled the Americans were quite tense. They constantly whispered to each other, looked at the clock, and at the strange device, a large metal suitcase that they called a detector. When they brought it to the fourth block, the device emitted sounds, not clicks like a Geiger-counter, but something like music, terrible music. On April 21, the head of the delegation, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer Jr., co-founder of the atomic bomb, asked for a meeting with the director of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Bryukhanov. The meeting was held behind closed doors, but Bryukhanov's secretary heard the Americans say, "You must cancel the experiment. It's too dangerous. You don't understand what you are playing with." Bryukhanov replied, "The decision is done in Moscow. I cannot cancel it." The Americans said that a phrase that the secretary remembered literally, "Then evacuate people, everyone you can, before it's too late." But a strange thing happened. On April 22, the entire American delegation left the USSR without explaining why. They just had urgent business at home. They flew away 4 days before the disaster. And now about the phone call from Reagan to Gorbachev. He really was not 6 hours before the disaster, but 6 hours before the experiment. At 8 p.m. Moscow time, April 25th, it's a bad translation. The description of the conversation is still classified in the USA and in Russia. But there's a leak from former employee of the Chernobyl plant. According to him, Reagan said the following: "Mikhail, we know what you are planning. It will not affect you, but also us and the whole world. Think again." Gorbachev replied, "I do not understand what you are talking about. We have only an ordinary experiment at one power plant." "Mikhail, we both know that's not so. You still have time to stop it. The decision has been made. We know what we are doing." After this conversation, Reagan convened an emergency meeting in the National Security Council. At this meeting, it was decided to prepare all civil defense services in the West Coast of the U.S., thousands of kilometers from Chernobyl. What did the Americans know? Where did they get the information? The answer may be in the documents of a project the CIA refers to as Stargate, a study of paranormal phenomena. In the partially declassified materials, there's a protocol for a remote vision session from April 15, 1986. Extrasensory operator Joseph McGonigal described his visions. "I saw a nuclear power plant in Eastern Europe. Above one of the reactors is a gap, not in the building, in space. From there comes cold and much more. Beings, not people. They are waiting. Soon, very soon, there will be a discovery. Danger, huge danger, not radiation, something much worse." Based on this vision and perhaps satellite intelligence data, the Americans concluded that Chernobyl is preparing not just an experience with a reactor, but an attempt to open a portal to another dimension. Sounds fantastic, but in the archives of Los Alamos Labs, there's a 1983 document called Possible Consequences of Uncontrolled Nuclear Reaction in the Presence of Space-Time Anomalies. The document models a situation strikingly similar to what happened in Chernobyl. The authors of the document warn that under certain conditions, the energy of nuclear collapse may cause a local break in the continuum. The consequences are unpredictable, but potentially catastrophic for the entire planet. The Americans knew about the possibility of this scenario, but where did Soviet scientists get this information? Or did they come to the same conclusions independently? In the CIA, there's a folder codenamed Chernobyl 83. Yes, 1983, 3 years before the disaster. In the folder, there are reports of agents of strange activity around Chernobyl nuclear power plant about the supply of unusual equipment. We're never going to make it through this today. We might have to, but I want to finish it. We might have to have, I don't know if I can do it myself. Maybe I can. JR showed me once how to just start a recording so it doesn't get cut off. Maybe I can get JR to do that so I don't have to leave I can't do it. JR, if you happen to be listening, maybe you could do that and then text me and tell me that you've done it so that we have a dual recording, because there's still a lot to go through. It might take another. There's no way I'm finishing in a half an hour. I've only gone through 15 pages and I got 38. So we're almost an hour in. Anyway, the arrival of the specialists, not from the nuclear industry, but from closed institutes engaged in fundamental research of space and time. One of the reports, dated 1985, ends with a conclusion. The Soviets are preparing a breakthrough in an area that we do not fully understand. Perhaps this is a weapon of a new type. Perhaps it's something more. I recommend maximum observation. After the disaster, the Americans were the first to offer help, but not humanitarian, technical. They sent robots that could work in high radiation zones. But these robots were equipped not only with manipulators, but cameras. They had sensors that fixed anomalies of magnetic and gravitational fields. Data from these sensors went directly to the United States, and these data show that in the epicenter of the explosion, there is an area where the laws of physics work differently, where time flows at a different speed, where gravity has a negative value. In 1991, after the collapse of the USSR, the Americans proposed a joint project to study Chernobyl, but not in a radiation environment. They wanted to study anomalous effects. The project was rejected, officially due to lack of funding, unofficially because someone in Russian leadership knew what the Americans were looking for. And they continue to look even now. U.S. satellites regularly photograph the exclusion zone, but not in the usual range, in the range used to search for gravitational anomalies. In 2019, there was a leak of information from the Pentagon. Among other documents, there was a report called Chernobyl is an undisclosed threat. The report said that the events of 1986 can be repeated more intensively in the period of 2025 to 27. How do they know this? What should happen 40 years after the disaster? Maybe the answer is in the last testimony. In 2022, a former CIA employee, John Smith, his name was changed, he passed away. But before his death, he gave a flash drive with a single file to journalists. The audio recording is 3 minutes and 17 seconds long. The recording contains the same sound heard in the command post of Chernobyl nuclear power plant minutes before the explosion. But at the end of the recording, there are a few more seconds. The voice is not human, but it speaks in broken English. 40 revolutions of your star, then we return. Be ready. 40 revolutions of the Earth around the sun. 40 years. 2026 Americans know, Russians know, but both are silent because panic will be worse than ignorance, or because they're preparing for something that ordinary people should not know. 30 kilometers. This is the exact radius set for the exclusion zone around Chernobyl. The official explanation is a safe distance from the source of radiation, but any specialist in radiation safety will say that this is a strange figure. Radiation spreads unevenly depending on wind, relief of the topography, and the type of radiation. Somewhere, a dangerous zone 5 kilometers. Somewhere, 50. Why 30? The answer is found in the archives of the General Staff. It turns out that the radius was determined not by radiologists, but by the military. And the basis was not for the level of radiation, but came from a completely different document. The same mysterious protocol black mark from 1984. This protocol has a scheme, a circle with a radius of 30 kilometers divided into sectors, and in each sector there are special marks, not population points, not roads, points with coordinates and strange designations. A7 node, beta 3 stabilizer, contour closure. What are these points? Senior Lieutenant of the Engineering Troops Pavel Dotsenko participated in creation of the perimeter zone. He says, we were brought in at night, given coordinates, and ordered to dig. Holes 3 meters deep, diameter 2 meters. A metal cylinder was lowered into each hole. What is in the cylinders, I do not know. They were sealed, and after installation, they were covered with concrete. There were 24 such points around the perimeter, 24 points in a circle, as if creating not a border of the zone, but a contour. The closed contour around the epicenter. In 1987, an expedition was sent to the zone of the Institute of Earth Magnetism, officially to study the influence of radiation on the magnetic field of the Earth. But the head of the expedition, Professor Igor Yampolsky, kept a personal diary. On June 5th, they found the incredible. These points are marked by military around a perimeter, creating the perfect magnetic ring. Inside the ring, the magnetic fields behave anomalously. It pulsates at a frequency of 0.3 hertz. This is the frequency referred to as Schumann's resonance, but amplified hundreds of times. On June 7, they made a discovery that we also cannot explain. In the center of the zone, exactly under the destroyed reactor, there's a point where the magnetic field of the Earth rotates to zero. Absolute magnetic zero. This cannot occur in nature. On June 10th, the expedition was curtailed. An order came from Moscow. All materials were seized, and we were ordered to remain silent. But Yampolsky did not remain silent. After 20 years, he published an article in a little-known magazine. The article was called The Hypothesis of Artificial Magnetic Trap in Chernobyl. In it, he assumed that the exclusion zone is not the protection of people from radiation, but the protection of the world from something in the center of the zone. After the article was published, Yampolsky disappeared. Officially, he left for a scientific exhibition in the far north and disappeared, but unofficially, he was seen in a closed NIA, I don't know that abbreviation, I'm sorry, near Novosibirsk, where he continues research under the guise of, Novosibirsk is a private, scientist city, where he continues research under the guise of top secret. Military units guarding the perimeter of the zone have strange instructions. An ordinary soldier, Alexei Petrenko, who served in 2010, tells us, we were told to watch not only so that people did not enter the zone, but that nothing came out of it. I asked, what does that mean? Sergeant looked at me strangely and said, you will see, you will understand, and immediately shoot to kill. And Petrenko saw. One night, standing a post, he noticed movement inside the zone. Something was approaching the border. In the night vision device, he saw a man, but this man was shining. He didn't reflect light. It was shining from inside of him. I called and ordered him to stop. He stopped and turned toward me. The face was not visible, only a glow. And then I heard a voice, not through my ears, but right in my head. Let me go. I need to get out. The time has come. I pointed the gun and the sergeant grabbed my hand. Don't shoot it, fool. This is a test. The shining man stood still a little and went back to the zone. Sergeant said, forget what you saw and do not tell anyone. But the worst thing happened to the expeditions that did not return. Officially, there were no such expeditions. Everyone who entered the zone returned safely, but their unofficial data. 1989, a group of 5 military specialists in chemical defense gear entered the zone to take samples. Communication with them disappeared after 3 hours. A search party found their equipment, but not them people. The equipment was neatly arranged in one place, as if people split it up and left. There were no traces of them anywhere. In 1993, an expedition of physicists also disappeared. 7 people. They reached the 4th block and passed the last message. We found the entrance. Let's go down. Nothing else was heard from them. In 2001, a group of, they say stalkers, but that's not what they mean, wanderers, found the entrance. Let's go down. No one heard about them again. In 2001, illegal intruders in the zone. 4 people experienced, knew every path. Their bodies were found a week later. But these were not quite their bodies. DNA matched, but a pathologist who conducted a discovery wrote in a report that their internal organs were changed at the cellular level, as if they evolved or mutated. These are purposeful changes, as if someone was trying to remake a human body for other conditions of existence. And now about mutations inside the zone. Yes, there are giant oaks in the pond. Yes, there are trees growing in a spiral, but there's another. What is not written in scientific journals. Biologist Elena Savchenko worked in the zone for 15 years. She studied local flora and fauna, and she found the impossible. And in the red forest, I found a tree, a pine tree, but it was not exactly a pine tree. Its DNA contained areas which are not found in any earthly organism. Moreover, these areas were not written based on 4 nucleotides like all earthly life, but on 6. 2 additional nucleotides did not exist in nature. They are synthetic, but who could synthesize them in the zone? Even more strange discovery was discovered by entomologist Viktor Krynov. He studied insect zones and discovered a new species of ants. Ants built anthills, but not chaotically, but according to a clear scheme. If you look from above, the ants form a right hexagon, and in the center of the hexagon there's a pit, deep, going down further than I could measure, and the pit is cold. In July, in 30-degree heat, and the ant from the ant pit was cold -20. I put a camera on a cable, and at a depth of 15 meters, the camera recorded a glow and movement. Something moving down there, something big. The red forest is a separate story. Officially, the trees died from radiation and stand dead. But people tell a different story. At night, the red forests come to life. Trees glow dim and red inside. Low vibrating sounds come from underground and underneath them. One of the wanderers, who calls himself Wolf, claims that he went down underground in the red forest, and there's a network of tunnels. Not Soviet, not ours. The walls are smooth, and everywhere is this red light. He said he reached a big hall, and there was something inside that he cannot describe. It was alive, but not an animal, intelligent, but not a person. It looked at me, and I realized it was some kind of a guard. It guards something. It does not let it out. The zone is growing. Officially, the borders are unchanged. But local villagers in the border of the zone say something else. Every year, the border moves a few meters. Invisible, but not inclined, as if something is expanding underground. One more fact. Physical laws do not work. In the zone, time flows differently. The clock goes forward quickly and then lags behind. Gravitation weakens in some places, and there are some places where a person can jump 5 meters up. Radiation behaves unpredictably. In one place, the background is normal. Made a step to the side, and you go to the other side. The exclusion zone is not just a contaminated territory. It's a place where reality is in contact with something else. And a 30-kilometer perimeter is not protection from radiation. This is a quarantine, but will it hold up after what is trying to break out gets out? In the secret report of the Security Council of Russia from 2020, there's an alarming phrase. The barrier is weakening. Urgent measures are needed to strengthen the perimeter. Time is critical. 6 years. 6 years from 2020. 2026. Again this date. The construction of the sarcophagus over the destroyed 4th power unit began in May 86. The official version is to isolate radioactive material, prevent the spread. It's logical, it's correct, it's understandable. But as usual, the devil is in the details. Major General of Engineering Troops Nikolai Tarakanov led the construction. 30 years later, when he was near death, he called a journalist and told what he had been hiding for decades. When I received the task, I was given 2 sets of drawings. The first is official for the builders. Ordinary protective structure. The second set, I still don't understand what we built according to the second set. The second set of drawings provided strange elements. Metal rods located in spiral around the reactor, plates from a special alloy placed at certain angles. And the main thing is the grounding system going to a depth of 200 meters. I asked why such a deep grounding. I was answered for the removal of static electricity. But what static electricity at a depth of 200 meters? And why would grounding rod need to be made of pure silver? Silver is a metal with unique properties, the best conductors of electricity, but also, according to ancient belief, metal is capable of holding other world forces. Coincidence? Architect Valentin Kuptsov recalls another strange thing. We poured concrete in layers, ordinary concrete, then a layer with metal shavings, then a layer with, I don't know what to call it. Black powder was brought in sealed containers. When this powder was mixed with concrete, the mixture began to glow. Not from radiation, it was checked with a dosimeter. It just glowed all by itself. The analysis of this concrete in later years in an independent laboratory showed the presence of rare earth elements in unusual combinations, and also traces of an element not on the periodic table, an element with an atomic weight of 140. Officially, such an element doesn't exist, but the most interesting thing happened inside the sarcophagus after it was built. Groups of monitoring specialists saw things that did not make it to the official reports. Dosimetrist Andrei Volkov worked inside the sarcophagus in the 90s. First thing that struck him was how cold it was. Outside, plus 30. Inside, that's about 90 degrees. Inside the sarcophagus, minus 10. That's about 15 degrees. It's probably a little, it's about right. About 18 maybe. Where does the cold come from? There's no ventilation. There's no cooling. And the second thing is the sound. The metal resonates as if it's alive, but not from temperature deformation. Sound came from inside, from beneath the rubble of the reactor. One day, Volkov went down deeper than usual to the room under the reactor, and what he saw there made him quit and leave the country. There was a hall, a large hall, which should not have been there according to the plans. The walls are covered with some symbols, not Russian, not English, not at all like earthly writing. And in the center of the hall is construction, metal, complex, similar to an antenna or a portal from fantasy films. It was not damaged by an explosion. Moreover, it worked. Weak buzzing, vibration, and the air around it trembled like over hot asphalt. Volkov took pictures, but when he showed the film, there was only a white spot in the pictures, as if the object was emitting something that was illuminating in the film, but not radiation. The dosimeter in the hall showed normal. In 2006, work began to diagnose the state in the sarcophagus. Robots with cameras were used. One of the operators who controlled the robot said, under the condition of anonymity, we sent a robot to the reactor mine where there should be fuel. We saw emptiness, a huge cavity that went deeper than the projector of the robot could illuminate. And this cavity pulsed, expanded, and shrunk as if breathing. The shift supervisor ordered us to immediately pull the robot out and erase the recording, but I copied several frames. These frames show a black, pulsating mass with a porous surface. The physicists who were shown the pictures could not explain what the object was. One said it looks like a black hole. But a black hole would destroy the whole planet. So this has to be something else, something that should not exist in our reality. A new sarcophagus. built in 2016, is even more mysterious. Officially, this is just a more modern protective structure. But why are elements used in the design which are clearly excessive to protect against radiation? For example, electromagnetic coils encircling the entire structure. Why does a nuclear burial have a powerful electromagnetic field or a system of sensors measuring not only radiation but fluctuations of the gravitational field, changes in magnetosphere, and even neutron flows? The engineer-designer of the sarcophagus did not disclose his own name at his request, but he shared it. There were points in the technical task that did not make sense from the point of view of radiation protection. For example, the requirement for all metal structures to be connected in a single circuit and connected to a powerful generator. Why does a nuclear burial have a power of 10 megawatts? 10 megawatts is energy enough for a small city. But where does it go? Officially, to the monitoring and ventilation systems. But any engineer will tell you that 1 megawatt is enough for all of this. A security officer at the new sarcophagus told us of a strange incident in 2018. It was a night shift. Everything was quiet. All of a sudden, all the electromagnetic coils turn on, all by themselves at full power. The buzzing was extremely loud. It lasted 17 minutes, but then stopped. All the systems were checked. No commands were turned on. The coils turned off by themselves, or turned on and off by themselves. A few days later, seismologists recorded a strange phenomenon. A micro-earthquake with an epicenter right under the sarcophagus, magnitude 1.2, but the strangeness, the earthquake was not from the depth up, but vice versa, from the surface down, as if something was trying to break from beneath the sarcophagus outside, but was stopped. A robot launched into the reactor after this incident transmitted alarming data. The pulsating cavity had increased. Now the diameter was 50 meters, and the depth of the cavity, the camera recorded movement. Something huge is in there moving in the dark. We increased the lighting, trying to see what was there, said the operator, and then the camera showed an eye, a huge eye measuring 3 meters in diameter. It looked straight into the camera, blinked, and the robot stopped working. It didn't break, it just turned off, as if someone took the batteries out of it. After the accident, access in the sarcophagus was limited. Robots are no longer sent into the reactor shaft. Monitoring is carried out only by external sensors. But the sensors show an alarming picture. Activity inside the sarcophagus is growing. Not radiation, but something else. Excuse me. Electromagnetic bursts are cleared. Temperature anomalies are becoming stronger, and more importantly, gravitational fluctuations. Sorry, needed a sip there. A physicist theoretician from a closed institute, his name is not disclosed, analyzed the data and came to a shocking conclusion. Under the sarcophagus, a gravitational anomaly has formed. If it continues to grow at this rate, by 2026 it will reach critical mass. We don't know what will happen next. Perhaps a local time-space collapse. Perhaps a breakthrough into another dimension. The sarcophagus is not protection from radiation. It is a seal. A seal on a door between worlds. And this seal is weakening every year. In the secret protocol of the meeting of the Commission on Chernobyl 2021, there is a phrase: containment is becoming critical. It is necessary to prepare for the Omega variant. What is the Omega variant? In the same protocol, there is a hint: evacuation of the population with a radius of 300 kilometers. Prepare for tactical nuclear weapons, the Omega variant. Notification of international community about force majeure. They are preparing for something that should happen in 2026 on the 40th anniversary of Chernobyl. Or for something that is only disguised as an anniversary. In the basement of the building in Lubyanka, there's a room without a number that officially does not exist, but the employees call it a black archives. There are documents there that are not to be destroyed, but they cannot be declassified. Never. In 2019, one of the employees of the archive, let's call him Mikhail, decided to take a desperate step. Realizing that he was inextricably ill and he did not have long to live, he smuggled out several folders, not originals, photocopies, and gave them to an independent researcher. The first document is dated 1950. This is a letter of the late Igor Kurchatov to Stalin. In the letter, the father of the Soviet atomic bomb writes, "Comrade Stalin, I am forced to report on the side of the effect of nuclear tests. Under certain conditions, a nuclear explosion creates not only electromagnetic impulse and radiation, but also what we conventionally call an explosion. The nature of the phenomenon is not clear, but the consequences can be catastrophic. Stalin's resolution is short. Study, keep it secret, special folders." The next document is the protocol of a closed session of the Academy of Science of the USSR from 1957, after the Kishtim incident at the chemical plant Mayak. The protocol contains a speech by a physicist whose name has been erased. Colleagues, what happened at Mayak is not just an emission of radioactive waste. Witnesses talk about a strange glow a few hours before the explosion, about figures in the sky, about voices sounding right in their heads. I propose to create a special group to study these phenomena. The proposal is accepted. The group is codenamed Department S. S from the word singularity. Next report from Department S in 20 years. Dry, scientific, but makes your skin crawl. In 1963, an explosion was recorded during an underground nuclear test in Semipalatinsk. The duration is 4 seconds. In the explosion, there was movement. The nature of the object is not determined. 1968, studying ancient texts found during excavation in the area of future construction of Chernobyl. The text contains a description of the gates between worlds and ways of their discovery. The key element is a large amount of energy released instantly. 1974, an experiment on the controlled creation of an explosion. A research reactor was used in the closed city of Krasnoyarsk, 26. The explosion was successful. The duration is 12 seconds. The object came out of the explosion, and the object is destroyed. Loss of personnel, 3 people. Experiments suspended. But the most shocking document is the protocol Black Mark 1984. The full version is not the one that was mentioned earlier. This one is top secret. Special importance. Protocol Black Mark. The goal, create a controlled portal to study alternative space and possible contact with non-human minds. Location, Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Object, C2, underground complex under 4th power unit. Date of holding, April 25 and 26, 1986. The date is chosen based on astronomical calculations. Maximum thinning of the barrier between spaces. Our cover, turbo generator test in escape mode. The expected result, short term, up to 30 seconds, opening of a portal, fixed parameters, possible exchange of information, security measures. In case of loss of control, immediate destruction of the reactor to create an energy impulse enough to close the portal. Acceptable losses of up to 100,000 people. Acceptable losses of 100,000 people. They knew. They planned. They were ready to sacrifice the entire city. The following document is a diary of the project manager of the same Comrade Vorobyov. Real name, Vorobyov Nikolai Petrovich. Doctor of Physics and Mathematics. Specialist in string theory and multidimensional spaces. April 10, 1986. Preparation is going according to plan. Equipment is installed. Staff does not expect a true purpose of the experiment. April 15. Data from the Americans through our source in the CIA. They know about the imminent thinning of the barrier. Their satellites have recorded an anomaly. We need to act quickly until they take their steps. April 20, contact established. They knew about our intentions and are ready to meet. They warn of danger. The portal may become two-sided. Additional protection measures are needed. April 23, the decision has been made to install a seal. April 25, the system delivers silver rods around the perimeter. In case of something, it will hold them on our side. April 25, 22 hours. We begin. God help us. Hang on one second. I'm going to see if this is going to keep on recording. Oh. Well, that's good to know. Looks like the old JR monsters got me covered. So, April 25, the system of silver rods round the perimeter. In case of something, it will hold them all on our side. April 25, 22 hours, we begin. God help us. Or, who is there on the other side? The recording is interrupted. The following is after the disaster. April 27, the experiment was out of control. The portal opened wider than planned. They started transition. We had to activate the Omega protocol, the reactor explosion. The portal is closed, but not completely. There's a micro break. It will grow. According to my calculations, it will reach critical size in 40 years. There is one more document in the archive. It's a decryption of the same message that came to all communication channels minutes before the explosion. The decryption was not done by people. The first Soviet supercomputer, BESM-6, took care of it. The message reads, "Inhabitants of Earth, we come in peace. The opening of the portal means the readiness of your civilization for contact. We are entering." And the answer sent by someone from the command post of Chernobyl nuclear power plant: "We are not ready. Danger. We close." The last message on the other side: "We understand. We are waiting. 40 revolutions of your star." Then attempt number 2. There are photos in the folder. Black, white, and grainy, but visible. Figures. Tall, thin, long limbs. They stand in the reactor hall of 4th block. Dated April 26, 2 hours, 30 minutes, an hour after the explosion. Sorry, reading a lot. But the hall of the photo is intact, not destroyed. Signature under the photo. Time loop. They are in our space, but in a different time loop. The explosion did not affect them. The last document in the folder, order, April 30, 1986, all materials of Operation Black Mark to be destroyed. Witnesses in isolation. Object CH2 conservation for an indefinite period. Radiation accident as a result of human error, but at the bottom is a note written in hand. Copies to be kept in a black archive. Descendants must know and be ready. Mikhail, who took out these documents, left a note. "I'm dying of cancer. Maybe this is payment for what I found out. But people have the right to know the truth. In 2026, the portal will open again, this time completely. Be ready or run as far as possible from Chernobyl." He died 2 weeks after transferring the documents. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but the pathologist did not officially inform his relatives. I've never seen anything like this. His internal organs were changed. So that was a poorly written sentence. They didn't tell him he died of a heart attack. They said his internal organs were changed, as if he was affected by something that was rewriting his DNA. Not cancer, something else. Documents that should have been burned tell terrible truth. Chernobyl was not a disaster. Chernobyl was first contact. Unlucky first contact, and 40 years after the first attempt, they will try again. The only question is whether we are ready this time and whether we want to contact them. There were 800,000 of them. Military, firefighters, doctors, builders, miners. They came from all over the Soviet Union to kidnap the atomic beast who broke free. They were called liquidators, but what exactly did they liquidate? Ivan Kovalchuk served at Chernobyl nuclear power plant. In 1986, his unit was transferred to Chernobyl. What he told 35 years later doesn't fit into official versions of events. We were brought in at night without saying where and why. We were unloaded in the forest 10 kilometers from the station. We were given not gas masks, but strange devices, sort of like metal detectors, but with other sensors. The order was simple. Scrape the forest and report any anomalies. What anomalies were soldiers looking for chemical protection in the forest? We walked in a chain, meter by meter, and suddenly my device began to squeak, but unevenly and with interruptions, as if transmitting a code. I called the sergeant. He looked at the readings and went pale. I called the officer on the radio. 15 minutes later, people arrived in plain clothes, fenced the area of the forest, and ordered us to leave. Kovalchuk violated the order and returned to see what they found. They had dug, and they pulled something out of the ground. I don't know what to describe it. A metal object the size of a refrigerator, covered with symbols. It shone, not bright, but in the dark it was visible, a soft blue glow. They loaded it on a truck and took it away. What was it? Part of the equipment from the underground complex thrown out by an explosion? Or something else? Helicopter pilot Sergei Voronov was throwing sand and boron into a burning reactor. A very deadly job. Many of his comrades died of radiation. But Voronov survived and remembers what others prefer to forget. On May 3, we made a night flight. We flew up to the top of the reactor, and above it the air trembled, but not from heat. It trembled like water in which a stone was thrown. Circles diverged from one point above the reactor, and in the center of the circles something hung. Not a helicopter, not a bird. Something geometrically correct, similar to a polygon, slowly rotating. Voronov reported what he saw. He was ordered to remain silent. But an hour later, the fighters lifted the air. What they were looking for is unknown. The airspace was officially patrolled. Miner Grigory Lysenko participated in the passage of a tunnel under the reactor, officially to fill a concrete pillow and prevent radiation from penetrating into groundwater. But Lysenko tells a different story. We didn't just dig a tunnel. We were looking for something. The officers went with some schemes, constantly changed the direction of the passage. At a depth of 30 meters, we came across a concrete wall. But it wasn't a foundation of the station. The wall was much older. The concrete was different, and there were inscriptions upon it. Not Russian, not Ukrainian, not at all like human writing. The wall was blown up. Behind it was a corridor going deep. We were sent up, and down came people in strange costumes, not anti-radiation, but like space suits. 2 hours later, they returned. The three were carried on stretchers, alive but changed. Their eyes shone in the dark. Green. These were taken by a helicopter. It is not known where. There are no liquidators on the list of victims. Dosimetrist Maria Semyonova measured radiation in different points of the zone. She had access to data that was not published. There were places where the radiation was absolutely impossible. For example, a point 300 meters from the reactor, in the morning, a deadly background of 5,000 Roentgen. At noon, the norm is only 30 micro-Roentgen, and in the evening, again 5,000, as if someone turned on and off a radiation according to a schedule. Even stranger, Semyonova was found in the village of Kopachi. In one of the houses, the counter showed not radiation, but something else. The arrow moved in a circle like the arrow of a compass. So I entered the house. It was cold inside, very cold, and there was a shadow on the wall. A clear shadow of a person, like in Hiroshima after the nuclear explosion, but there was no explosion in Kopachi. Where did the shadow come from? Semyonova took picture of the shadow. When the photo was taken, not one, but 3 shadows appeared. The other 2 were translucent and had incorrect human proportions. BTR driver Nikolai Gonchenko, BTR is a personnel carrier, was driving officers around the zone. One night he was woken up and ordered to prepare a car. They loaded some boxes heavy with lead and went to the station. Not to the station, but into the forest. There was a clearing, and in it was a circle of stones, ancient, overgrown with moss. Officers unloaded the boxes into the center of the circle and began to do something strange. They installed devices, drew symbols on the ground. And at midnight, something incredible began to happen. The air in the center of the circle thickened and became visible. Then there was a glow, and in the glow there were figures. 3 figures, tall, thin, not people. Officers talked to them about something. I don't know in what language, but the sounds were strange and inhuman. The figures then disappeared, and we left. Goncharov tried to find this clearing during the day, but he couldn't relocate it, as if it did not exist. Or did it only exist at night? Radiologist, I think that's a radiation expert, but it's not radiologist. That's a bad translation too, I think. Ilyana Petrova treated liquidators in a special clinic in Moscow. She saw all stages of radiation disease, but some patients were ill with something else. They did not have typical symptoms of radiation loss. Instead, changes at the cellular level. DNA was rebuilt. New sites were added. It is not clear where they came from. One patient who was dying said to me, "They are inside me. They remake me for themselves. Soon I will be one of them." Who they are, he did not explain. After the death of this patient, his body disappeared from the morgue. Officially, he was cremated according to sanitary regulations, but the morgue employee whispered to Petrova that he was taken by the military, and he was still warm, although it was 12 hours after his death. Engineer Andrei Mikhailov controlled robots on the roof of the 3rd block, cleaning radioactive graphite. Robots constantly went out of order. Radiation burned out the electronics, but one breakdown was special. The robot just stopped and began to transmit a signal. Not an image from the camera, but a coded signal. A cryptographer decoded it. These were the coordinates. The point is 15 kilometers from the station. A group was sent there. They found an entrance to an underground complex, an entrance that even the station management didn't know about. What was in that complex, Mikhailov does not know. But after that, all the robots received new firmware that blocked the reception of any signals from the outside. Valentina Orlova, a psychologist, worked with liquidators who developed post-traumatic syndrome. Many talked about the same thing. They had dreams, the same dreams. A huge city of glass and metal. The sky is another color, purple, and creatures that look like people but higher, thinner, larger eyes. The creatures say something, but not in words. Thoughts appear right in their heads. The main message is one: we will come, wait. Orlova made a map, noted where the liquidators who saw these dreams lived. It turned out to be a spiral, with the center in Chernobyl. The closer a person worked to the reactor, the brighter and more detailed the dreams. Pyotr Novikov provided communication between liquidator groups, and on May 12, strange signals appeared in the air. These were not interference from radiation, it was a transmission structured with repetitive patterns. I recorded it on a tape recorder. When I scrolled the record back and forth, I heard a voice, a human voice, speaking in Russian. "Do not be afraid, we are friends. The portal will open again. Be ready to accept us." His recording was confiscated. Novikov was transferred to another facility, but he remembers one more detail. The voice called the date April 26, 2026. Why did liquidators ban communication with each other after returning home? Officially, so as not to spread panic. Unofficially, so that they do not compare their memories and do not understand the scale of what is happening. Colonel of the Medical Service in Retreat, retirement is what that means, Viktor Sokolov led the medical care of the liquidators. In 2022, while dying of cancer, he revealed a secret he kept for 36 years. Among the liquidators was a special group of about 300 people. They were affected not by radiation, but by something else. They began to change physically and mentally. Some could see in the dark, others heard radio waves without a receiver. Third, knew what was happening hundreds of kilometers away. We isolated them in a special sanatorium near Moscow. What happened to these people? Officially, they died of radiation disease. In fact, I don't know. They were taken somewhere in Siberia. They said that they were creating a special settlement group for them, a closed settlement where they could live without being in a danger to ordinary people. Alexander Dyatlov cut off unbroken ammunition. He's a sapper, one of those guys that go in and clears minefields and stuff. Yes, there were such people in Chernobyl, remains of military exercise. But once he was called to an unusual object. It wasn't a bomb, and it wasn't a shell. It was a sphere about 1 meter in diameter, perfectly smooth, no seams. Metal, but the metal was unknown. It did not react to a magnet, did not conduct electricity. And it pulsated, not visibly, but by touch. You touch and feel the vibration coming from inside. The sphere was, they tried to open it unsuccessfully. They did not, they tried to weld it, use diamond drills to drill into it, and acid. In the end, it was plunged into a lead container and taken away. Belov does not know where, but a week later, everyone who touched this sphere had to undergo a medical examination. And everyone found the same changes in blood tests. Unknown type cells appeared. Doctors were panicking. The cells were not cancerous, were not mutated. They were just different, as if they belonged to a different species. We were given injections. They said it was anti-radiation therapy. A month later, the test came back normal. But I still sometimes feel the vibration, especially at night, as if something inside me is resonating from something far away. Senior Lieutenant to the KGB, Oleg Makarov, his name has been changed, was responsible for the safety and secrecy of the operation. He knew what ordinary liquidators did not know. There were 3 levels of admission. 1, ordinary liquidators. They were only told about radiation. 2, officers and specialists. They knew about the underground complex. And 3, a third level, about 20 people, no more, who knew the truth. What truth? That Chernobyl is not the first place of contact. That there are similar gates in 4 more points on the territory of the USSR. They are trying to come from that side. Let's call them guests. And the reactor explosion was the only way to not let them come through. Makarov showed a map with marked points. In addition to Chernobyl, there's an area of the fall of the Tunguski meteorite, Lake Baikal, a specific place not indicated, Mount Yumantau in the Urals, and a point in Antarctica where the Soviet station Vostok is located. All of these places are united by one thing: anomalous activity. magnetic storms, inexplicable phenomena, and the disappearance of people. Everywhere we build objects. Now, isn't that one in Antarctica? I meant to look this up, but forgot that the Soviet station Vostok, didn't they take a bunch of people there and they all disappeared? I think that happened years ago. Officially, scientific stations are military bases. In fact, observation posts and containment. The last thing Makarov said before disappearing. In 2026, all 5 points will be activated at the same time. No longer a local breakthrough, but a massive invasion, and I'm not sure we can stop it. Biorobots. This was the name of the liquidators who manually removed graphite from the roof of the third block. 90 seconds of work and a deadly dose of radiation. But Vasily Chernov, one of the biobots, received not a dose. He picked up a piece of graphite, and under it, he didn't know what to describe. A crystal, a stone, it was transparent with rainbow overflows. And when I took it in my hands, the world changed. I saw a station, but not destroyed, a whole working station with people around, but they were different, taller people with bigger heads. It only lasted a second, and then I was dragged away. The crystal was taken away, and I was sent to the hospital. But since then, he has had visions. He sees the future, not always in order, but sometimes he sees, what does he see most often? Huge ships in the sky over Pripyat. And not our ships, but the ships of the Soviet Union. And the date on the calendar is April 2026. All this evidence draws a picture far from the official version. Liquidators fought not only with radiation, they were the front line of defense against something much more terrible. Many of them paid for this knowledge not only with their health, but with reason. In a closed military archive, there are statistics that have never been published. Of 800,000 of these people, 50,000 died in the first 10 years, officially from cancer and consequences of radiation. But there's an inscription in small font, 12,000. The cause of their death is not established. 12,000 people died from something medicine could not determine, from changes that began in Chernobyl and continued in their bodies. From contact with something that should not exist in our world. Most terrible thing is the process has not stopped. The liquidators are still alive and are continuing to change. Slowly, imperceptibly, as they're preparing for something, what they themselves do not know, but they all feel. Time is close. In the closed Institute of Theoretic Physics in Novosibirsk, there's a department which is not on any official documents. Employees call it the Department of the Impossible. Scientists work there studying phenomena that do not fit into modern scientific paradigms. Professor Dmitry Volkov has been heading this department for 20 years. In 2021, he published an article under a pseudonym. The article was called Chernobyl Incident as an Experiment to Create Controlled Singularity. Analysis of all available data leads to a paradoxical conclusion. He writes, the explosion of the fourth reactor could not have occurred for the reasons indicated in official reports. The energy of the explosion was much higher than the heat reaction could have given. Moreover, the nature of the destruction indicates implosion. An explosion aimed inward, not outward. Volkov offers his version. An experiment was conducted to create a controlled singularity that could become a source of unlimited energy or a weapon of unprecedented power. Calculations show that under certain conditions the energy of a nuclear reactor can be focused to a point smaller than an atom. At this point, there would be a collapse of space-time, and singularity is formed. If the process is controlled, a revolutionary source of energy is obtained. If control is lost, the singularity grows, absorbing matter around it. The only way to stop it is a powerful energy impulse in the opposite direction. For example, a nuclear explosion. I believe this is what happened in Chernobyl. The experiment went out of control. The singularity began to grow, and the reactor was deliberately blown up to neutralize it, but it was not destroyed. It stabilized and is still there. It grows slowly, absorbing energy from the collapse of radioactive elements. Georgy Malinitsky, a specialist in chaos theory, offers a different version. He believes that Chernobyl, there was a breakthrough in a parallel dimension. Modern physics shows the existence of many universes. They are divided by energy barriers, but under certain conditions, the barrier can be broken. A huge energy is needed, concentrated in a small volume and a special geometry of space. Malinitsky analyzed the location of all elements. Am I going to get cut off here? Actually, it doesn't look like so. Okay, cool. I don't want to be cut off and have something else start. So there you go. Modern blah 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 blah. A huge energy is needed, concentrated in a small volume. Malinitsky analyzed the location of all elements of Chernobyl and found an amazing pattern. 4 reactors, grids, administrative buildings are all located according to the principle of fractal geometry, forming a complex mandala. This cannot be a coincidence. Someone specially designed the plant as a giant machine for a breakthrough between worlds. The reactors give energy. The underground complex focused it, and the geometry of the plant created a desired configuration of space. So on April 25, 1986, all conditions coincided. Astronomical alignment, maximum solar activity, special state of the Earth's magnetosphere, and so the experiment began. The portal opened. For a few minutes, our worlds united and something began to pass from the other side. The explosion of the reactor was an emergency measure to close the portal and not let it break through. Doctors of physics and mathematics, Ilyana Krylova, studied time anomalies in Chernobyl. Her conclusions are even more shocking. In the epicenter of the explosion, time flows differently. The difference is small, a second or so per day, but it accumulates. In 40 years, the lag has accumulated almost a half a year. This means that the center of the zone, time flows slower than outside. Krylova believes that the explosion created a time loop. Imagine that time is a river. The explosion created a whirlpool in which time spins in upon itself. In the center of the whirlpool, there is a point where the past, present, and future exist all at the same time. This explains the strange visions of the liquidators. They saw not hallucinations, but glimpses of other timelines. The whole station, instead of a destroyed one, they saw a whole station instead of a destroyed one. They saw strange creatures, futuristic ships. All of this is real, but in different times. And that's what scares people, adds Krylova. The time loop is unstable and it's expanding. According to her calculations, by 2026, it will reach critical size and collapse. It is impossible to predict what will happen at that moment. Maybe the time will stop in the radius of 100 kilometers. Maybe there will be a merger of all timelines, or a permanent portal between times will open. Former KGB officer Colonel Mikhail Zubkov offers conspiracy theory. He believes the disaster was staged and that the real experiment was successful. The portal was open, the contact was established, and technology was obtained, but it was necessary to hide it from the world. Therefore, an accident was staged. They blew up the old reactor, evacuated the population, created an exclusion zone, the perfect cover for continuation of contact. According to Zubkov, under the sarcophagus, the portal is still working. Exchange is going through it. We give samples of Earth life. They give us technology. This is nuts here. Where did all those breakthroughs in science appear in the last decades? Internet, smartphones, AI, all these technologies are not of our origin. Look at the pace of development before and after Chernobyl. Before 1986, linear progress. After that, exponential. In 30 years, humanity has made a leap that was supposed to take centuries. Biophysicist Andrei Sakharov, the same surname as the famous academician, studied mutations in the Chernobyl zone and came to the conclusion of directed evolution. These are not random mutations of radiation. They are purposeful changes in DNA. Someone or something is rewriting genetic codes of living organisms inside the zone. Adapt earthly life to other conditions. The word is Platzdarm. It's a front. It's like it's a military term. You set a operation point. It's like a bulkhead where you take a foothold. There you go. He prepares a foothold. Sakharov found that all mutations obey a single algorithm, as if there is a program that methodically changes the biosphere in the zone. The ultimate goal is to create a hybrid ecosystem in which both Earth and non-earthly forms of life can live. The zone is a landfill, a laboratory under the sky. They are preparing conditions for mass colonization. And judging by the pace of the changes, preparation is almost complete. Philosopher and esoterist Vladimir Meger offers a metaphysical explanation. He believes Chernobyl is the point where the material world comes in contact with the spiritual. The ancient Slavic religions knew about this place. They called it the butt of the earth, the point through which souls come into the world and leave it. Soviet scientists unintentionally or intentionally activated this portal, and according to Meager, the creatures they saw in the zones are not aliens but souls stuck between worlds. The explosion disrupted the natural order, and now the border between life and death in Chernobyl is blurred. Therefore, there's a strange energy. Therefore, people see dead relatives, hear voices, receive knowledge they should not have. The zone is a hole in reality through which information from other planes of existence seep through. All these theories combine one thing: the recognition that the official version of the Chernobyl disaster does not explain the facts. Too many oddities, too many coincidences, too much classified information. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Perhaps Soviet scientists really did conduct an experiment outside the framework of ordinary nuclear physics. Perhaps they discovered something that humanity was not ready for, and perhaps the consequences of this discovery will be fully revealed after 40 years of the disaster. In a secret report of the Russian Academy of Sciences from 2022, there's an alarming conclusion. Regardless of the true nature of Chernobyl, all models converge on one thing. In 2026, a comparable or superior event will occur on the scale of the 1986 disaster. It's recommended to start preparing for the evacuation of the population from potentially dangerous zone. Preparations have already begun, but it's not announced so as to cause panic. Shelters are being built, supplies are being accumulated, secret exercises are held. The world is preparing for something. What exactly do the individuals know? The rest can only wait. The 2020 pandemic helped to reveal new secrets of Chernobyl. When the whole world closed for quarantine, tourist trips to the zone ceased. Scientists received a unique opportunity to conduct research without interference. Dr. Kovalchuk from the Institute of Nuclear Physics led a secret expedition in May 2020. What his group discovered made it possible to completely review the understanding of the processes taking place in the zone. They installed super-sensitive sensors around the perimeter of the fourth power unit to detect pulsation, non-radiation, gravitational. Every 26 hours, there's a microscopic change in gravitation, as if something is breathing under the sarcophagus. But this is only the beginning. Data showed that the period of pulsation is reduced. In 2020, 26 hours. In 2021, 25 hours, 40 minutes. In 2022, 25 hours, 20 minutes. If we extrapolate this trend, by April 2026, the period will be reduced to 24 hours, coinciding with the period of rotation of the Earth. What will happen with the resonance, we can only guess. In September 2021, there was an incident that was not in the news. A group of illegal, they call them stalkers again, but that's not what it is, wanderers, I guess, penetrated the basement of the destroyed fourth block. Only one of the 5 returned. Maxim Voronov, 28 years old, a programmer from Kiev. He went down through the ventilation shaft. The dosimeters showed the room, which is already strange. At a depth of 30 meters, we came across a door. A new door installed recently. Electronic lock, surveillance cameras, but everything is destroyed. The group broke the lock and we went inside. Behind the door was a corridor leading into a hall. In the center of the hall was construction. How do I describe it? Imagine a 3-dimensional projection of a 4-dimensional object. It constantly changed shape, flowed into itself, and it was cold, terribly cold. A quarter of Maxim's comrades approached the structure closer and they just disappeared. They didn't dissolve, didn't evaporate, disappeared. In 1 second they were, and in the next they were not. Only their clothes remained. I ran. I don't remember how I got out. Voronov surrendered to authorities and told them about what had happened. His testimony was classified, and he himself placed in a psychiatric clinic. But before that, he posted on the internet one photo taken in the hall. The photo shows a blurry structure resembling a Mandelbrot fractal. I don't know what that is, but 3-dimensional. Computer graphics specialists claim it was impossible to create such an image artificially. Too complex geometry. In March of 2022, satellites recorded an anomaly over this exclusion zone. For 17 minutes, an unreflected radio wave. It was visible to radar, but thermal sensors showed an area of abnormally low temperature. Minus 200 degrees Celsius. Ukrainian military lifted fighters into the air, but the pilots saw nothing. Only the devices recorded a hole in the space of about 100 meters. After 17 minutes, the anomaly disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. Biologist Natalia Semyonova made a discovery in 2023 which shocked the scientific community. Studying soil samples from the red forest, she discovered a new form of life. Not bacteria, not virus, not fungi, something completely different. Cement-based organism that use radiation as a source of energy. Their DNA, if you can call it that, consists not of 4 nucleotides, as in earthly life, but in 8. 4 additional nucleotides do not exist in nature. Moreover, these organisms have a collective mind. They communicate with each other using electromagnetic impulses. When a colony reaches critical mass of about 1 billion, it begins to show signs of intelligent behavior, solve problems, learn, even try to communicate with researchers. Semyonova conducted an experiment. She showed the colony simple math problems, projecting them with a light on a cup of Petri, like a Petri dish. The colony answered, changed its configuration, forming numbers. Correct answers in 90% of the cases. This is not earthly life. She came from the outside. This life came from the outside. It doesn't matter. Perhaps through the same portal that opened in 86, and it's evolving at an incredible speed. During a year of observation, she recorded 7 generations, each more complex than the previous. In the fall of 2024, research groups began to disappear. Not stalkers, not illegals, but official scientific expeditions with permission and security. In 3 months, 4 groups disappeared, 23 people. Search teams found their camp camps untouched. Things in place, no sign of struggle, people just gone. Observation cameras recorded strange things. At the moment of disappearance, the air around people began to flicker, and then bright flashes, and then emptiness. The only clue is a recording from a dictaphone of one missing scientist. His excited voice is heard on the recording. They are here. They look at us. They are beautiful. They call. We have to go. Goodbye. In January 2025, an event occurred that the authorities tried to hide, but information spread on the network. The new sarcophagus has a crack, not from old age or corrosion, but from the inside. Something hit that wall with great force, left a dent in diameter of 5 meters. Robots were sent inside for research, past shocking footage. At the center is a sphere, perfectly black color, diameter of about 20 meters has formed. It absorbs all light. Robot projectors could not illuminate it, and it's growing, slowly but steadily. In a day of observation, the diameter increased by 7 centimeters. Physicists are in a panic. It looks like a black hole. But a black hole of this size would destroy the Earth in seconds. So it's something else. What exactly? No one knows. In February 2025, all nuclear power plants within 1,000 kilometers of Chernobyl recorded strange anomalies. With 3 minutes and 17 seconds, all reactors synchronously changed power, not on the operator commands, but by themselves. Power dropped by 30% and then returned to normal. The time of the anomaly is 3 minutes, 17 seconds, exactly the same as the mysterious signal on the night of 1986. The most alarming discovery was discovered by an international team of scientists analyzing all available data on Chernobyl using AI. The IAEA processed terabytes of information and issued a forecast. According to the model, on April 26, 2026, at 1:23:40 a.m., exactly 40 years after the disaster, an event will occur in Chernobyl, which the IAEA has designated as a singularity of the Omega class. What this means, IAEA has not explained. They have added that it's recommended to evacuate a population within a radius of 500 kilometers. The probability of survival in the epicenter is 0. The probability of global consequences is 87%, but the government is silent. The satellite images show the mass construction of underground bunkers in Poland, Belarus, and Russia. Military bases are being brought into increased readiness. Troops are being drawn into the zone, allegedly for exercises. The last expedition returned from the zone on March 15, 2025. The head of the expedition, Professor Igor Velichko, refused to give official comment, but in private conversation he said one thing: "We're too late. The process is irreversible. They are already here. They are just waiting for the appointed time." Velichko answered the question of who they are. He said, "I don't know, but they are smart, powerful, and clearly not local." And they have a plan in which we are only participants. Less than a year remains until that fateful date. Scientists continue to research. Military is preparing for the unknown. Government is developing evacuation plan, but no one knows what to prepare for. But what is to come goes beyond human understanding. The only thing everyone agrees on is that on April 26, 2026, the world will change forever. The only question is whether humanity will survive to see this new world. A world where Chernobyl has become not a symbol of disaster, but a gate to the future. Is this a good future or a bad one? Only time will tell. One thing is clear: there is no way back. This is either the end or the beginning. And that is the end. And I tell you what, it took me 2 hours and 8 minutes. So that took a little bit longer than I thought. Thought I could get through that quite a bit quicker, but apparently not. And a lot, I researched all of this. I went back and I checked it out. After watching this video, first, I thought it was interesting because of what I told you in before. But secondly, there are people that believe this. There are societies, not societies. There are clubs over there that get together and discuss and look at some of these things, and they talk about these. A lot of these things are claim to be fact. It was really funny because when I took the opportunity to run this through AI and see if AI had anything that they could give as far as information on this. And do you know what I discovered? AI won't talk about it. Now, that's freaking weird. When I feed it into AI and I say, listen, what out of here can I find in various places? Search Russian sources inside of Ukraine or Ukrainian sources in Ukraine, Russian sources in Russia, American sources. Check all the content of this, and it will not talk about it. Now, initially, I was intrigued by the story anyway, because it's Chernobyl, and you go through and you have a look at it. But why won't AI talk about it? I don't understand that. They just keep saying, you know what? I said to the AI gods out there, I said, you know what? I'm going to run this through my, I'm going to tell this story on my radio program. And guess what I got back? Nonsense. It said, well, you could be in trouble for generating false hysteria and stuff like that. I mean, what? Who cares? It's a freaking story. So what? Whether it's true or not true, it was interesting. And I what am I supposed to do? Oh, this is probably a bunch of lies. Who cares? I mean, I care. It's the points that they come up with, and they said, yes, this, no, that, yes, this, no, that. And, but who the hell are you going to believe if your AI won't tell you anything about it? I mean, interesting stuff and a little bit on the crazy side. But again, I'm a huge X-Files fan, always have been. And, wonder if old Scully and Mulder need to look into this. When you read through some of this, why is it always that aliens are the people with the big heads and the long arms and the big eyes? Well, can't they come up with something different these days? I suppose, if the aliens, if ever they're going to come for you and be nice with you, they look like you. If they're going to shred you apart, they look like, from the real Alien movie with eggs in the ground and stuff like that in a foreign ship. Or they look in that one called, have you seen that one called Silence or whatever it's called? Holy crap. I remember the first time I was even gonna watch that. I ain't watching that. I don't like scary movies anyway. But I endeavored to watch it. Holy crap, that's frightening. And not a big fan, and I'm glad I didn't see it in a big movie theater, but instead in my, I can't remember. I think it was a small TV even. Could have been a big TV, who knows, but nowhere scary. Anyway, I very much appreciate you hanging out for as long as you have. This is a very long show. Somehow I'm going to have to combine those two together and see if I can figure that out so I can put the broadcast together with two recordings. But I very much appreciate each and every one of you for listening. This is Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor you have been listening to. You can join me every night at 9 p.m., usually only till about 10:30, except on Sundays. But I went a little overboard tonight. And you can join every night, 9 p.m., damradio.com/live. Or you can listen to all the old shows at internationalflavor.com. I very much appreciate you. and look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. So have a good evening. Actually, good night.
Here's your damn music.